you very much. Okay. This is as good as the election night. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you to our cousin Lee Carter and Greg Bradley. Thank you for teaching me so many things, and thank you for inviting me to come tonight to speak to you. I did want to say also thanks to all the dinner co-chairmen, Nikki Eason, Michael Holmes, and Tom Hutchins. You've done a tremendous job, and you need to be congratulated. Last year, my husband and I were both in attendance, and let me tell you, it's a lot better at the end of the campaign than it is during a primary election. And I also want to say that I'm very honored. Last year at this event is when I met Joe Salmonese, and I was so impressed. I'd heard so many fabulous things about him, and he did such a great job tonight, and he is so good on the Hill. We are all very fortunate that he's in charge. Thanks, Joe. And I also wanted to say, Elkie Kennedy, I was so moved by your comments last year, and thank you again for being here this year. There are so many people to thank for helping me in my election, but one person in particular I want to thank tonight is George W. Bush. But I also have one other person I want to thank, and for him to stand up, and that's my wonderful husband of 30 years, Chip Hagan. Yay! Tomorrow, probably at this time, tomorrow Chip and I will love to watch our annual tradition of watching the Oscars. And I've realized how much the Oscars are like Washington, D.C. The Oscars honor amazing special effects. Washington, D.C. has Aretha Franklin's hat. The Oscars have Kate Winslet. Washington has Ralph Nader. They try to win over and over and over. And Oscar is a bald, unsmiling, 81-year-old man that is not really human. Washington has Dick Cheney. My love of the Oscars is just one of the many things that you don't know about me. And although I do know many of you personally, there are people in this audience who don't really know me. So let me just take a minute and fill you in. A couple of the people I do know really well, though, I want to say hi to first, and that's Mitchell Gold and Bob Page. Thank you very much, both of you. And I also want this crowd to know that Bank of America, you were my first employer for about 10 years, and you're a great company. But let me tell you who I am, a little bit about me. I'm 33 years old, according to the information that I personally put on Wikipedia. And being senator is truly not my first job in Washington. In the 1970s, I was an intern, and part of my job was working as an elevator operator. There were much more innocent times back then when an intern going up and down was legal. Whew! And I am proof, am I a little red? No. I am proof that a female politician can get national attention without shooting a caribou. And I'm sure you know I'm someone who had a long, difficult campaign. There are probably easier ways to get into the U.S. Senate seat, but I did not know Rob Blagojevich. And speaking of Rob Blagojevich, although he and I have completely different ethical standards, we do have a few things in common. We both spend a lot of time with our hair. Our names both have 3 letters, and we both will have a minimum 6-year term. But thank you. Thank you to the Human Rights Campaign, and particularly the HRC Carolinas for having me here tonight. It is truly to be an honor, to have an honor of being one of your 2 U.S. senators. And one of the best parts is actually coming back to North Carolina, hopefully every weekend. And right now, I just want to once again say thanks, and thanks again to my husband. But I've got to tell y'all, in the first few weeks in the U.S. Senate have been substantially different from my 10 years in the state Senate. In the state Senate, I had a plum office, lots of windows, a lot of space, and natural light. Well, in Washington, things are very different, particularly for a freshman senator. I've seen very little daylight since I've been there. I leave my little apartment in the DuPont Circle area. I come home very late at night. I go into my cramped office in the basement of the Dirksen building with no windows, and even when I get out to vote, I walk in the tunnel between the buildings to the Capitol, very little light. But I'll also tell you this, I have never felt more invigorated as I do today about the challenges our nation faces and about our ability to get through these trying times to put our country back on track again. And let me tell you this, I'll never, ever have gotten calls from the President of the United States when I was in the state Senate. And we've had a new president for just about a month now, and already we've moved forward on so many of the promises that we've made on the campaign trail. President Obama, myself, and the countless others who campaigned on behalf of those who felt they did not have a voice in Washington have let it be known that they do have a voice, and it can be heard loud and clear in the hallways and on the floors of Congress. As you heard Joe, we passed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which I was honored to co-sponsor as my first bill. And during my campaign, Lilly Ledbetter spent a day with me on the campaign trail, and we came to Charlotte, North Carolina, and she is a fabulous woman. And it was interesting to me when she was up to sign the bill, to be there for the signing of the bill, I'm sure she got a pen. She mentioned that the president had asked her to go on the train with him coming into Washington. And I just think that is so appropriate for the fact that the president and Michelle Obama think that much and that dear about Lilly Ledbetter. But that will make it so that women in North Carolina no longer earn 78 cents to a man. We passed an expansion of the Children's Health Insurance Program, which will help 10 million of our nation's children get the coverage and treatment they need to lead a vibrant and healthy life. As recently as late last year, 1 out of every 8 children in North Carolina, or close to 13% of the state's children here, were without health insurance. This was a difficult vote for me. Less than a month into my service in the U.S. Senate, I was faced with a situation in which the health of thousands of our state's children were at odds with a key industry in North Carolina. But I did have to vote in support of the 10 million low-income and disadvantaged children this bill helps. In this economy, when families are being forced to choose between paying their bills and putting food on their tables, I could not make it harder for them to keep their children safe and healthy and cared for. And as you know, we also have vigorously debated the economic recovery package that recently passed. I had some serious concerns about the original economic recovery program as passed by the House of Representatives, and I am pleased that a group of Democrats and Republicans who were serious about doing the right thing for our country were able to forge a compromise with lower spending and more fiscal restraint in mind. As with every vote I take in the U.S. Senate, I consider my constituents and what you elected me to do in Washington. Quite simply, no one disagrees that something needs to be done to stimulate our economy. But there were different opinions on what the correct course of action should be. Let me tell you what the Economic Recovery Act will do. It will help create or save 105,000 jobs here in North Carolina over the next 2 years, in a range of industries from clean energy to healthcare, with 90% in the private sector. With our state's unemployment rate at about 8.7%, increasing in all but 3 of our state's 100 counties, doing nothing was certainly not an option. The American public is sick of partisanship and pork barrel spending, and I am hopeful that the Recovery Act we passed and that President Obama signed, which represents the middle, not the left or the right of the U.S. Senate and the American public, will help get our economy back on track. And I know that that's important to each and every one of us here in this room. And importantly, there are no earmarks in this bill. When the plan is enacted, all citizens will have the ability to see how the recovery funds are spent by going to www.recovery.gov. And an independent Recovery Act Accountability and Transparency Board will provide regular reports to Congress. That kind of transparency and accountability is a great departure from the way business has been done in Washington in the past. www.recovery.gov. And there is no doubt that we are making progress, but there's equally as little doubt that we still have much, much further to go. We need to move our economy forward into a 21st century clean, green economy, which will help create and sustain jobs right here in North Carolina, and those jobs that cannot be outsourced. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act will double renewable energy generating capacity over the next 3 years, creating enough renewable energy to power 6 million American homes. We have the bright students, the first-class research institutions, and the drive to succeed. What is holding us up from moving our economy and our workforce forward? Instead of talking about how high the price of gas might get this summer, we need to start talking about the savings we will realize from greening our communities and our economy. We need to make sure that every single child in this country receives a first-class quality education that makes full use, go NCAE, that makes full use of their creativity, their ingenuity, and their passion, all of which we need to stay competitive in this global economy. And with this bill, we will be able to modernize in North Carolina at least 263 schools so that our children will have the labs, the classrooms, and the libraries they need to compete in this 21st century. And speaking of schools and students, I am committed to passing the Matthew Shepard Act that Joe also spoke about. And I know many of you know that Matthew Shepard was a student at the University of Wyoming when he was murdered. But you may not know that he was once a student at Catawba College right here in North Carolina. And as a mother, and as indeed a compassionate human being, I am horrified by what happened to Matthew, who was killed at the age of 21 with his whole life ahead of him. And as a U.S. Senator, I can do something about it. The Matthew Shepard Act will expand the existing law to authorize the Department of Justice to investigate and prosecute certain bias-motivated crimes based on the victim's actual or perceived race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. We need to ensure that hate crimes, regardless of who they're committed against, are prosecuted and those at fault are held accountable. And you know, all of what I've said and what we're going to be doing in this next year in the U.S. Senate is not going to be easy. But as W.L. Bateman said, if you keep on doing what you've always done, you'll keep on getting what you've always got. And we simply cannot continue to do business as usual. We cannot keep doing what we've always done. We need to think outside the box. We need to think long term. We need to understand that the decisions we make today will have consequences down the road. I am so honored to be one of your 2 U.S. Senators from North Carolina. And while the challenges before us are great, I know that our collective will to get our economy back on track, put people back to work, and get things right again is great. I want to thank all of you so much for having me here tonight, especially Lee Carter. I look forward to working very closely with you, Joe, and everybody else in the HRC community. And most of all, I've learned that there are 3 fabulous advantages for having HRC support. First of all, your votes. Secondly, your money. And I will always have better hair and makeup during a debate. Thank you very much. Thank you.